Recording. All right, there
I,
we go.
I
All
pressed the
right,
button.
so we're gonna try this out today, and we're gonna try to do it without the author, and we're gonna try to do it in spite of our tech difficulties, because we know we're powerful enough to do it anyway, and that's what we're gonna do. So the book we're talking about today is called Walking in Wonder, and it's Mary Magdalene Lives, and it's book one that's going to be part of a series on that book. So, how many people got to read the book?
I started it. I
Okay.
didn't get it soon enough to
All
finish.
right. Okay, no problem. So, that's what we say. You can come even if you didn't read the book. So, we're going to just talk about it a little bit in general and a little parts that struck me in specific. So, the oh yeah, if everybody could mute for a little bit, but and then just unmute when you want to comment or have a question. That way we'll have as little background noise as possible. Does everybody know how to do that? Okay, great. All right, beautiful. So the thing I really liked about the book is that it deals with Mary Magdalene as if she was today, like if she was living right now. And even though it goes back into her past from where she lived before, it goes back and forth. And so it really struck me, like, even in the beginning of them seeing the Christmas star, announcing the rearrival and the cars stopping and people looking up from their cell phone. It was a nice juxtaposition of now world and back in the old days when that wouldn't have happened. Did that strike anyone else as interesting? Oh, you guys said you didn't read it, but can you imagine how that would be interesting? Yeah, yeah. So I liked that part, and I liked that it's really showing her power and how she came into her power. So a lot of times we think of Mary Magdalene, we look at Mary Magdalene, and some of us know she was really powerful and she was a disciple and all of these things. She's mentioned 12 times in the Bible. And I think that's interesting because that's brought up in the book. And yet, when we hear her spoke about, I know for me as a kid, the main thing that stood out to me that was brought to my attention about Mary Magdalene was that she was a prostitute. And that's not what it talks about in the Bible. And it's not what it talks about in this book, even though this book is not um, literally connected to the Bible. Like it doesn't follow the biblical timeline and stuff. It goes back and forth. So, what do you guys think about that? What is your experience of Mary Magdalene? What do you think of her?
Pam, I always thought that Mary Magdalene was Jesus's wife.
Okay.
And,
All
and
right.
I don't ever remember about being a prostitute. So that's
Okay. Well, her being Jesus's wife would be a lot closer to to you know not that she was really his wife, but she was his closest disciple, and she was the disciple he loved. Um, when they talk about the disciple he loved, we always assumed. I was always taught it was Lazarus because he loved Lazarus,
Hmm.
but as I learned more and more, I learned that he also loved Mary Magdalene, and that was a thing. Anybody else want to say what they thought about Mary Magdalene?
She's kind of fascinating to me because she was sort of she was outside of the norm somehow from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Jesus had sort of saved her from something ugly that was going on in her life, whether, you know, in The Chosen, she's showed as having had demons, and, you know, we were taught about her being maybe a prostitute and all this stuff. She was not a normative woman for the time.
Right.
But
Yes.
then, you know, I think we all know there's an awful lot of strengths in not being a normative woman for the time, because women didn't have much power back then.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So getting her out of that context of being a good girl frees her up to speak and frees her up to think and be a
Yeah.
single woman. And, you know, how many women were single back then?
Right.
And if she was married, it never really says she was married to Jesus, but she sure kind of was there to look out for him and take care of him
Mm-hmm.
somehow,
Yeah.
with a few quotes we know. I don't know. I always thought she was powerful in a sort of a background kind of a person, outside the norm way. And I
Okay.
love the way they show her in The Chosen. Have you seen The Chosen, Pam?
I haven't seen The Chosen.
Well, I put it off a long time. Then it was Easter week, and I thought I'd just break down and watch it. And it was fascinating because she was a very soft spoken woman who had a lot to say.
Okay.
And I like thinking of her that way.
Yes.
Was one of the few disciples who stayed as Christ faced the end. And the fact
Yeah.
that any of them as women being there and taking as active a role as they did in following Christ was exceptional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things when I go back into the book is that it shows her going through her journey coming into her power. So in this book, Mary Magdalene is a very powerful woman. And she has followers and disciples. And she walks the path and does the same kinds of things Jesus did, which I love because Jesus says throughout all of his teachings that all of these things he does, we can do and more, right? And so it shows her doing this. It also shows her as being part of the Essenes who were preparing the way for Jesus to come, right? And it refers to the whole path of Jesus as the way, but they were preparing that path. And that's something that, can you hold on 1 second? So that's something that I saw as a way that I saw that was really powerful for me because I've studied the scenes for a long time and how they were preparing the path, preparing the consciousness to be able to accept Jesus's arrival, right? And she also refers to Jesus um, as Joshua, Yeshua, Jacob, and not as Jesus because she goes by his birth name, which to make him into a man who then elevated to the Christ consciousness. So I like that aspect of the book too. And I was wondering what you guys thought about that.
So tell us again, she referred to him not as Jesus, but as another name in the
Yeah. Hold on, I'm gonna make sure I say it right.
yeah.
Give me a
I'm trying to
second.
find it.
Yeah.
Yeshua ben Joseph.
There you go.
And isn't Yeshua a Hebrew pronunciation of Jesus?
It is, but that's how they referred to him, and then we called him Jesus, but Yeshua, they called him Yeshua ben Joseph. That's how she referred to him. And
Joseph was his father, so it's Yeshua, son of Joseph, I think, isn't it?
yes, and I think it was good she referred to him that way so that we could see him as a living person and then elevate to a higher state of consciousness.
Hmm. That's theologically complicated.
Okay, tell me.
Well, he elevated to a higher stage of consciousness as if he wasn't a God man from the beginning.
Yes and no. So it depends on how you believe, but if we say we're all from God, we were all created by God, we all came from God, then we all have that spark. And so he came here to show us something. And so he had to go through the human experience. That was the whole point of him coming here, was to go through the human experience and show us how to be connected to God and how to elevate our state of consciousness. And there was no reason for him to do that if he was just going to come and be God. He could have just been God without coming into a human consciousness, into a human
And
body.
in a way, that's what all humans do.
Yeah,
In a sense, all humans have got that divine consciousness.
exactly.
But to help other people, you go through experiences similar to other people, so you understand them.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
he had to go through the human experience so that humans could see what was possible. I think my mother put it really well when I was younger, and she doesn't remember she said this, but when I was really younger, she said Jesus came as a window to the world for us to see the potential of who we could be, and we decided instead to worship the window. So there was a reason he came, and if we're looking at the window so that we can grow into that window, then that would mean he had to be a human and go through the human experiences to elevate a state of consciousness, not just come all full blown in that state of consciousness. Because then what would we learn? Does that make sense?
That's a complicated one. I mean, we've been dealing with the Trinity for 2,000 years, trying to figure out what we mean by it. So it's a tricky one.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely it is. And that's one of the things that makes the book a little controversial because it's absolutely dealing with the it's dealing with the whole concept in a way we may not have seen Mary Magdalene, and we may not have seen Jesus if we just go on a straight path of Christianity. So this steps outside that line in order to really bring to light who Mary Magdalene was. So, Paul, I'm going to pick on you a little bit because you said you've had some experiences um, with learning more about Mary Magdalene. I'm going to ask you, what do you think about the things I've said so far? What do you think about that whole experience?
I really got into Mary Magdalene when I read the Da Vinci Code, which is a famous book, as you all know, by
Mm-hmm.
Dan Brown, and he knows a lot what's going on in the world, right?
Yeah.
And of course, he's revealing the truth. So, what I really look at when you're talking about this book is what is the significance of the story of Mary Magdalene, right? And to me, it's about how the Christianity has suppressed the feminine energy, which has been suppressed for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, this is about appreciating the power that women have. I think
Yes.
this is coming back. This is coming back in this time because we need to access that divine feminine in all of us
Yeah.
because the world has been this false masculine energy. Right.
Yes.
which even a lot of men don't like being in, right? And it's really interesting because, you know, I train healers, and it's really interesting in this class. Every time I went to this particular class, I was thinking of Mary Magdalene. I thought, that's really interesting. And then I realized, and I asked one of the students, and I realized she was actually Mary Magdalene in a past life.
Mm-hmm.
Really connected to her, and she knows a lot about her. And so I actually learned a lot from her, talking to her about, she wasn't totally Mary Magdalene, but it's like she was part of Mary Magdalene. And now she's come, so there was a various energy that was Mary Magdalene. She's sort of part of Mary Magdalene, if that sort of makes sense. And it's about empowering women. And I feel
Yes,
this is what this book is about.
absolutely.
It's about helping women know that they're powerful,
Yes.
because in the world right now, there's a lot of suppression of the feminine energy. And you can tell that in particular regions, as you know, Indian culture, Greek culture, Arab culture, right, where women are very suppressed. And so to me, the whole story of Mary Magdalene is about women getting into their power. It's about
Yes.
men accessing their divine feminine power, so that we're all balanced. I feel that's the significance of the story.
Yeah. And I think that comes out a lot in the book because it really lends itself to Mary Magdalene leaning into and owning her power and then helping other women become empowered too. So doing it in her previous incarnations during crisis time and then coming back and doing it now in today's time, seeing that same empowering voice and that same those same empowering lessons, I thought was pretty cool in this book.
Thought some of the value must be in, it's described this way in the introduction: visualizing a happier, more just world is a direct assault on the forces that are trying to break your heart. As Ursula Le Guin says elsewhere, the most powerful thing you can do is imagine how things could be different. What if?
Hmm.
I think that
Yes.
certainly, I mean, as I recall, um, Christ's first encounter with her, he removed 7 demons or something like that from her. And it doesn't say that she was a prostitute, although it looked kind of that way when the way she was portrayed in the Chosen. But 7 demons will do it to you no matter what, I would imagine.
Hmm.
But uh, and it also says she knows the bad as well as the good living and work, working with Christ in his mission. So she really had, you know, both pictures of the
Yes.
epitome of
Mhm.
evil and the epitome of good.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I had planned on having having I had planned on having Gina Diane read some aspects from the book. And I'm gonna read the beginning part when they're first seeing the star, because it shows it shows her the beginning of them really understanding that this star was coming. And um so I you just talked from the introduction, Carolyn. I'm just going to read a little bit about about them seeing the star, because it really struck me how we might react to seeing that in these days. Um, so, and she makes this thing. So when she does the prologue, she's she And I thought it was interesting because the prologue is from her, right? From Mary Magdalene. And she says, I've been called a saint, a prostitute, a wealthy woman, a woman cured of 7 devils, a priestess, a lover, a wife, a companion, the apostle to the apostles, and more. This is my story. You will learn how I first met Jesus, whose real name was Joshua ben Joseph. Discover how together we developed and taught the wisdom of the way, and what happened as I traveled with my followers, sharing this wisdom with the women of Galilee. My role during Joshua's crucifixion, as well as the period before and after his ascension, will be revealed in the subsequent volumes of my account. I will tell you which myths you may already know have some truth to them. Even after Joshua ascended, I continued to connect with him. You will learn what I did after my time in the Holy Land, how I continued to journey with Yeshua to various parts of the world during my lifetime. And I think that's so cool because one of the things I think that Jesus wanted to teach us is that death has no real power over us. It's another transition. And in this book, by sharing her story of how she continued to journey with him and to meet with him after he had ascended, after the crucifixion, I think is very powerful just in itself. There's so many concepts this book deals with, from reincarnation, Christ consciousness, the power of women. So I think that's all pretty, it all is pretty powerful in and of itself, but it challenges a lot of our traditional, normal, like, beliefs. Do you feel that?
I'm going to just speak about this for a second. The
Okay.
mere fact that she said that she continued the conversations with Jesus after he had been crucified and rose from the dead, that tells me that there is an ability that, well, she had, but I actually think that we have, of communicating with those who have passed before us.
Yes.
And I know that I frequently call on those who have passed before me and ask for their help or their direction or their thoughts or their whatever. And I have a sense that they, in fact, talk with me. But she seems to have a direct link, which
Mm-hmm.
makes me think that people like Edgar Casey and the couple, where they're doing the channeling, that this is
Mm-hmm.
something that if we pay attention, those people in our day are people that have that kind of connection, and that they're not crazy.
Mm.
Right.
So often they're considered to be crazy. So that is something that is affirming to me.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Unfortunately, most of us have a tendency uh, to declare somebody's crazy when their ideas are strong and powerful, and yet not something that we've encountered before, or aren't part of the common way people are looking at life anyway,
Yes.
which is an ignorant and uh, uh, not helpful way to look at something like that and evaluate it.
Yeah, it is. And that's one of the things, just trying to keep all of that in mind. I mean, this book challenges so many things. You have to kind of keep an open mind reading it. So it's a little bit
Yeah.
controversial. But it states a lot of things. And you're saying yes, Laurel. Tell me about what it raises up for you.
Well, I had a, I was brought up as a Protestant, as a Lutheran, and, the whole Reformation was had an element in it of creating the class structure and all that of the times in Germany and France and England and all that. And women had very little power in any of that. And
Right.
whatever they had, in the Catholic orders and all that, pretty much got squelched in the Counter Reformation. So Hildegard of Bingen and people like that, there was a time when they could speak up and advise popes and all of that, but the Counter Reformation put an end to most of that ability to have such an active voice. So, we come out of all of that. And I don't know if you guys grew up this way, but, there really was not any powerful female voices in my religious learning coming up. And however, I did the Camino de Santiago in 2019. That's the pilgrimage trail that goes across northern Spain. And I did it with a very, very faithful Catholic friend. And where we started out was at Lourdes, which was one of those places where there was a Mary sighting, and the holy water of the place where she was seen was a seep in a rock and all this. And it's very much an active pilgrimage site to this day. And that's way outside of my box.
Mm-hmm.
But she wanted to go, so we went. And it was really powerful to see the connection people had with Mary. There's no good Lutheran that wants to talk about that. So it opened something up to me that there's an energy and a power and a connection that's missing.
Yes.
In the religious context I came from, where the feminine is pretty much lost. Even though now, there are plenty of pastors that are female and all of that. So that's gradually changing. But it was really wonderful to see this active connection. And it expanded in a lot of ways. She used to like to say the rosary when she'd get really tired on the trail, or when she'd fall down, which she did a few times. So she taught me how to say the rosary. And Lourdes was a place where, that was all that anyway, she taught me how to say the rosary. I never would have done that, but it was a connection to the consciousnness of the female presence of Mary, however you go on to frame them,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that was way outside of my consciousness. And I agree with what Paul said about the Da Vinci Code. The story is that Mary went to Europe and continued her ministry up southern France and through Marseille and all of that. And there's lots of legendary stuff about that. So, what do I know? Maybe it makes sense that the suppression of the female in the culture would have made it hard to have an active sense of who Mary and Mary Magdalene were.
Yes.
It makes sense that kind of got shoved aside. So let's get it back,
Mm-hmm.
There's more to this story than we've been allowed to hear, I personally feel.
Absolutely.
And doing the Camino taught me a lot about the human experience of that through all these people I was meeting.
Yeah. And I think that's when you start to see, as you go through, how many books were suppressed because, the church decided it would be this set of books. And once they decided they were going to accept the religion as the religion, they chose which books was going to be the books. And all of the rest of the books were discarded. But there's actually a Gospel of Mary.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Gospel of St. Jude. And we don't ever get to see those other Gospels because they weren't considered worthy of going in the book. And most of the Gospels that were written by women, actually all of the Gospels that were written by women, were eliminated out. So we never see the power of women in the traditional path of the church.
And all that happened after Rome got involved in all of this.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
They weren't very big on their own women, were they?
Right, exactly. And that's what I'm talking about. Because before that, when it was the way, women were very much involved and very active and were disciples, but you only see 12 disciples ever when you're talking about coming from the perspective of the church. They're
Mhm.
all men, and the church is supposedly built on Peter as the rock when he immediately denied Christ 3 times as soon as the through the whole thing, right? And not on any of the people that stood by and stood fast, because there were a lot of women involved.
And it's
So
really interesting when you talk about 12 disciples, because if you add Mary Magdalene, it's 13, and 13 is considered an unlucky number, when it's
mm,
actually it's a very lucky number.
yes,
So that's
absolutely,
interesting.
absolutely. 13 completes the cycle,
Yeah.
and we never get that. We because it's just unlucky. And the whole thing about it being unlucky was because of the destruction of the Templar Knights. They were all killed on the 13th, um, at one time, as many of them as they could catch, because they were um, challenging the
You
crown.
And of
talking
course,
about the Templars?
Yeah,
and of
That's a
course, the other,
lot later.
and
not.
of course,
I'm sorry.
and,
Not. I'm sorry. Not them. I'm
and of course,
sorry.
the
Go
other
ahead.
thing, another thing about 13 is there's 13 lunar cycles
Yeah,
in the year,
exactly.
and of course, the
That's
lunar
why I
is
said
very,
it completes the cycle.
yeah,
Mm.
and lunar is a very feminine energy,
Yeah.
as we know, the moon. Yeah.
So I think so with the 13, it was his inner circle of disciples, even though Mary got left out. But there were also other disciples that weren't in the inner circle yet. So I think we get a distorted picture sometimes, So I think, and some of that's addressed in the book. So um, I just like how that part is going.
I want to give you a funny play with words here. If you look at
Okay.
the word if you look at the word history, his
Mm-hmm.
story,
Yeah.
There you go.
maybe this is her story rather than his story.
There you
Yes.
go.
There you go. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, um, so yeah, I mean, I'm finding this a little bit challenging doing it without the author, because we had several meetings on how we were gonna
Oh,
divide this up and work on it, and now it's just me.
Pam, maybe a good thing to do is can you summarize what the main outcome of the book was? Like, what did you say at the end of the book about moving forward with this idea of Mary Magdalene, and also sort of conclusions at the end? It would be great to hear.
So this is book one.
Okay.
So in in this book, it goes up to one period. So it goes up to her role in bringing about the clearing the path for the Christ, for the Christ to come in, explaining who he was. It talks about what goes on leading up to the crucifixion, but then everything after that is in the next book. So there's an excerpt from the next book in this first book. Um, so you don't get a conclusion of,
Okay. Yeah.
and you get
Yeah.
the first section of her life moving into this, and becoming, feeling her power and becoming who she is, and developing her own followers, and understanding that she's powerful enough to do this, right? And learning that through working with Jesus, Yeshua, as she calls him.
Mhm.
Um,
Originally, Gina Diane had thought this was a three book process.
yes.
And as of, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, she said, no, I think it's going to be 5 books. So,
Okay. That makes
and
sense, because it's this covers just a small section, and it's a long book. And
Yep.
then you have the next section, which you find in the excerpt. So I think she's going to be sharing an excerpt in each book of the next book.
She's also putting together a podcast. And what she's going to do with the podcast is take people to the sacred sites that
Oh,
Mary
wow.
Magdalene visited and
Mhm.
talk about and show what was going on at that time. Now, a
Right.
podcast is a much shorter thing than a book, but I think that that's also going to be interesting.
Yes, absolutely. And inside the book, there's a free thing you can download that gives you Mary Magdalene's disciples and what they were doing and who they were and what their history and stuff like that is, so you can start to picture it and get a better feel for them and know who they are as you go through the different books. So it's very coordinated. It's just each part is just a section of her life. It's not like a whole thing. You can just say, well, this is what happened.
Did you
You
talk
gotta-
in the book about those, what, from what just Anne said, did you talk in the book about the sacred sites that might want to take people to?
She talks about a few of the sites. She doesn't talk about all of the sites. So the sites that she ran into before um before Jesus is passing and during the things where things happened with her specifically, she talks about. So she spends a lot of time talking about the the Christmas star, as she calls it, that appeared in the sky to announce Jesus is coming. Um, and to your point, Laura, she does call him the Holy Child, the Messiah or Savior.
Mm,
Um,
okay.
but he's not. He has to come through the human state and rise up to it, and then the Christ consciousness is um, it comes upon him when he's baptized. It's
There
not.
you go. I was waiting
Yeah,
for you to say that. Yeah.
yeah.
This
So
is my son with whom I am well pleased, kind of stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
So those are the things. So those kind of points come up. Um, and so those kinds of places get shown, but it doesn't, because it doesn't go right with the biblical timeline. There's a lot of jumping back and forth between her lifetimes with Jesus, her lifetime in 2500 AD, and then her lifetime now. So it deals with reincarnation and it shows her coming through each of these times, always dealing with these same points, right? Because
Mm.
she's way preparer, I guess. And every 2500 years, the cycle repeats in her book that every 2500 years, a new holy child is born and comes into the world because the world needs it. And because there's this idea of the Christ consciousness in this incarnation, there's the idea that it's not embodied in one person.
Mm.
There's so you're not going up a specific place to see someone because that's not how it comes out. So everybody can see the star that comes no matter where they are, but then that Christ consciousness that comes with it is not in one person that you go see this one person. It's in a, more of a collective of, it's hard to describe, but yeah.
Pam, I think I want to say thank you to you for this effort that you have made. It is fabulous. And I
Yeah.
think to sort of wrap up this conversation, although it's way bigger than what I'm about to say, I think that this book is talking about the awakening of women
Mm-hmm.
in this day and age, but
Yes.
using Mary Magdalene as the focal point for us to look at. And it's calling all of us and all the feminine parts of the men and the women to come forward and be present with each other and for each other. And I really like this book, although
Yeah.
I was reading it from the perspective of she was the wife of Jesus and she was carrying on his work. That's how that was the lens that I was reading it through. And
And that's kind of the lens that they paint in the Da Vinci Code, especially in the movie version, that they had a child and
mhm.
all of that. So,
Well, there's something about genetics being spread around the world, and
yeah.
maybe we all have a little piece of that genetic in us. I won't go there, but it's just sort of it hits me every now and again. This is interesting. So, Pam, thank you for your efforts this month. I really, really appreciate it. I think Serenity's back with us next month, I think.
Yay.
And do you have a book that's been chosen, or are you looking for a book?
I'm looking for a book. I'm really leaning toward Atomic Habits, but me and Serenity haven't quite totally agreed on what book it is.
Okay.
So I wanted to wait and be able to talk to her, but she's out of town, so we
Hmm.
haven't. But that's the book I'm personally leaning toward.
So tell us a little bit about Atomic Habits.
So Atomic Habits are a different way of thinking about meeting your goals and being able to achieve the things you want in life.
Hmm.
So we all know that we can do things easier when it's a habit than when we are just trying to force ourselves. And this book is about how to let go of the idea of willpower, which will pretty much always fail you at some point, and build habits that support what it is you want. And it's through building, the book deals with building very, very, very tiny habits that you can complete in like 2 minutes, and then stacking those habits so that you have a routine that works for you in a way that you can complete it and do it and know that it gets done. And it's not about willpower, it's just the habit of doing it and loving what happens to you in that 2 minutes to keep you moving forward.
Okay.
So I really like it because it's not so much focused on, oh, my goal is to do blah 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 blah, or my goal is to do da 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 da. It's my goal is I want to be this person,
Ah,
and so because I want to be this person, and this person does boom 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 boom, these are the things I'm gonna do to
Mm.
support that habit,
mm-hmm.
right?
Sounds a good,
Interesting.
sounds a great book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So,
it's like, for me, I'm a martial artist, and people don't usually think of people like me as martial artists, but I am. And one of the things I wanted was to be able to support my becoming better as a martial artist. And so one of the things I do as part of my routine is I practice my martial arts every day. And so it because that's something that's supporting. And so it's like, okay, I'm a martial artist every day, so I do this because that's what martial artists do,
Mm.
right? And so I just do, I start with doing my Tai Chi routine because it's easy and it's peaceful. And then I feel so good, I want to do it again, right? I want to get through it. I want to do it. I don't want to just stop when the 2 minutes is up because it feels good. Um, and another one is like, I want to be a piano player. And so, but piano playing is hard. There's all these complicated things, but it's only complicated because everything is thrown at you at once. But what if you took, 5 minutes every day and practice one thing, right? Maybe you took 5 minutes every day and just made your fingers be able to work independently on the keyboard because you're learning how to play the piano. And that's supporting you becoming a piano player, right? So it's little bitty habits that build on each other to make you into what it is you want, that supports you in being what you want.
Well,
Well,
that,
what you're really saying there, Pam, is that habits actually reprogram you.
Yes,
You put it changes your neurological network in your body, so
yes,
it becomes a normality for you, and therefore you can live it out by habits.
absolutely.
But it's a great technique. I love the idea of it. I
Yeah.
think it'd be valuable.
Yep,
So-
absolutely. And so that's why I love the book. So yes, so
Yeah.
I want to bring that book in next month.
so it's about taking the little steps like we do on Giddy Up Days,
Yeah,
and the bigger steps like we do with the Get It Done week that we have. Little bit by little bit, we get closer and closer to what we really want to be or become. Is that correct?
mm-hmm.
Yay! Thank you,
So
Pam.
Pam,
Thank
Yes,
so Pam,
Thanks,
Pam,
Pam.
can I just ask you, Pam, can you send me the link to the book club a week before
Yes,
so that I can post it in my events? Because yeah, I didn't see it and I didn't get around to doing it this month. So because then I can promote it, in my meetup groups, social groups. So
I thought I had done that, Paul, and I apologize. It could be me that was at fault there.
no, that's okay.
I just want to say thank you and end the recording. Pam, you did a fabulous job.
Yeah, you challenged us.
Like you really did, and you got
Yeah,
us
it's a great
all
job.
to participate and think. So thank you.
It's a great